Hey, what's up, guys? Today's episode is a very special guest, Mr. Rodney Barnes. His name is synonymous with creativity to innovation and his storytelling prowess. With a career spanning across multiple mediums from television, comic books, Rodney has captivated audience with his unique style and insightful commentary on the human experience. Some of Rodney's acclaimed shows, such as The Boondocks, one of my favorite shows, Everybody Hates Chris, and Marvel Running Race, HBO, Winning Time, and so many more. Through these projects, Rodney has skillfully explored the themes of identity, race, social justice, earning him widespread acclaim and admiration from audience and peers alike. So, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with the brilliant Rodney Barnes. Start with an icebreaker.
Okay.
And the first topic we start off with is things that make white people uncomfortable.
Yes.
You heard this before.
The television show I had in development? Or
Correct. So we talk about
we wanted to do it as a story.
So we're going to tell you a story that we
happened to us.
That happened to us that made white people uncomfortable.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start it off. So I used to bartend at a nightclub called Bootsy Bellows.
Okay.
It's right there on Sunset in Doheny, and I was working the Bad Boys 3 premiere, and all the Sony execs was there. So
Don't mention any names, please.
I'm not gonna mention any names. So I'm bartending, and a guy, I'm like walking the crowd, I'm bartending at the tables, and a guy just passed. Hey, what are you doing? You doing drinks? I was like, yeah, what you want? He said, can I get a vodka soda? I'm like, oh, I got you, blah, blah, blah. I went to go grab him a vodka soda. And then he was like, hey, what do you do? I was like, I'm a writer. I didn't think he was like, I assumed he thought I was a bartender.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm a writer. I'm a filmmaker. I'm working on my short film, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, really? Here's my card. Come to my office, send me email. I would love to, connect you with some people.
So we send the email to his assistant. And as soon as he sent the email, he followed back with some dates that was available. And so we get in the meeting, and we're ready. We're fired up. This is our first studio pitch meeting. We're so excited. We're walking up to Sony Pictures. I'm talking about a library of
We have our Bible.
We have our Bibles. We have our full slate. We have our mandates.
So, let me get a little bit more context. We've been writing for about 4 years now at there. So we have probably like 6 scripts that's kind of polished, that won a little bit awards in little festivals. So we feel a little bit strong about these scripts and ideas.
Very comfortable. And so we're sitting in the lobby. We're ready. You're practicing your pitch. You're like, okay, here we go. We're going to do this.
And this is our first pitch.
This is our first pitch.
We don't know how pitches go.
Right. So, okay, now we get called up. I have my presentation as far as, a little backstory. We have a mentor. His name is Michael Anthony Snowden. He will write chicks and a whole bunch of
I know Michael.
So, you know Michael.
Yeah, he's like, when you go in there, man, and when you pitch, make sure you have material that's gonna shock them and and you gotta. One time I went to a pitch, I didn't have nothing. I just told them my idea. So we had like a full presentation.
We had decks.
We had a little
mini comic strips
and things like that. So we had all this material. So we go into there and we go into his office, and it is the vice president of theatrical.
Wow.
And we did not know. So we're pitching television to vice president of theatrical. So we go in there, we go into our pitch, and we're talking TV, we're talking this. He's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Then he's like, you have any films? I was like, yeah,
of course. So we pull out 3 films, 3 of our most polished films. We're going pitching. We're pitching like high concept stuff, action, big cars, explosions.
This one period piece is like 1950s, Fast and the Furious, black, nostalgic, black people getting into racing, drag racing.
And a little context about that script. And the early 50s, 60s, drag racing started in Burbank, California. And we wrote a whole concept around the early ventures of racing and drag racing. So we have that particular pitch. We go into the pitch, and he's like, oh man, I love it. So who was your agent that invited you here? I was like, oh, no. You did. You invited us here. Oh, but who you guys are with? You guys were A3, CJA, Gersh? Oh, we don't have any reps. Wait, how you guys were at the party?
And then he said, wait. And then he's like, oh, I remember you gave me the drink. And then he said,
thanks so much.
Wait a minute. I thought you was Will Smith's cousin.
Wow.
Yo, he was like, because I guess he was talking to some like Will Smith family member before,
Right.
and he was like, "No, I'm just the bartender."
We're just the bartender. So we was like, it was just so awkward. And when we told him that we just a bunch of nobodies, and they're talking to a Sony executive, and we had all these ideas because every homeless man has a script and an
This
idea.
is true. Yeah.
So he was just sunk in his seat. He was like, I have a bunch of nobodies in my office right now.
Well, he was kind enough. First of all, he was
very
super kind. He listened to us. He gave us great advice, and he said, "You're more than welcome to come back
And of
anytime.
course-
Pitch me more ideas."
And of course, we try to circle back, of course. And of course, it didn't happen. You know how Hollywood, yeah. Set the meeting up. Oh, yeah, we'll get you guys back in here. Here, let me introduce you to this person. Let me introduce you to that person.
Yeah.
And they try to duff us off, and then we never, heard back from them. So we want to hear a story.
Good story. Good story.
We want to about how the time that you made a white person feel uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. There's too many stories to tell. I mean, that's sort of comes with the territory. I mean, I think probably the one that was most painful for me was the first time I ever pitched professionally. I had a really big star, who's still a star, attached to a TV animated project. And we went into Fox Studios, and the night before, I was already nervous. His agent called, and he was like, trust me, say this, say this, say this, say this. It's probably about 10 things. And so we get at the table, and I felt like Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption. It's like white people across from me, and I'm sitting there, and I start to pitch, and I'm making absolutely no sense. And they're looking at me, staring at me. And I'm trying to remember what the agent said. And he's there kicking me under the table. And they basically gave me a script deal just to stop talking.
Wow. What year was this? Well, how early stages were you in this in your career?
99.
Wow.
98, 99, someplace around there. Early, very, very, very early.
1900s.
The 1900s, the 19th. It was the 19th. It was the 19th.
Wow. They gave you a script deal.
I mean, they don't do that anymore. Of course not.
No.
Well, speaking of script deals, we want to you are a very prolific writer, producer, storyteller, a frontier, and a pioneer in our space.
Thank you.
Producible scripts and content. From your perspective, what is a producible script or idea that, say, if an undeveloped filmmaker wants to go and pitch you, we can't pitch 100 million ideas for a first-time filmmaker. So,
well, I think much to your story, it has a lot to do with who you're pitching to and what that person is looking for.
Right.
So, and what that person would consider to be producible. If you're writing a Fast and Furious type script for a little company that can't afford to put gas in a car, it probably wouldn't be a very good idea. But if like you're working, say, Blumhouse, and you have a horror story that you want to pitch, finding the boundaries. Okay, this would probably be $1 million to $5 million budget. So I have to write a story that's relatively interiors, not too much outside, not too much special effects, not too big, mostly psychological. I would probably build a story around the reality of the boundaries of the person that I'm trying to pitch to.
Now, what kind of projects would you say that will be? It doesn't matter what genre you would say, or would you, like, as a first-time filmmaker, would you start in as, okay, horror is your niche for right now? And
As an entry level for just a filmmaker to get in their foot wet into the
I don't think
studio
there is one genre. I think the genre that you do well. If you're more of a, it's according to who the creator is.
Right.
If I'm a comedy person and they're not buying comedies right now, for me to try to do a horror film that I don't know the math of horror, I don't know the specificity of horror, I think it would be, difficult for me to probably put my best foot forward if this thing even gets made and it's not good.
Right.
So I would probably try to find places and people who do the types of things in an entry-level way that I do. If my idea is a small idea and I'm just trying to get the idea of me out as a creator into the world, try to find something that is doable, that speaks to my strong suits, and can make me put the brightest light on me that will hopefully get to the next thing, which is bigger, and the next thing, next thing, next thing.
Now, you grew up in Eastport, Maryland.
Annapolis, Maryland.
Annapolis.
In the community of Eastport.
Community in Eastport. Growing up in that type of community, what kind of characteristics and traits that you learn from that particular neighborhood or community that you say, this has made me who I am?
Really strong working class neighborhood. I think most of my friends, we all had jobs, like 7, 8 years old. We all had, whether it was the stuff like cutting grass or shoveling snow, the Naval Academy Stadium is there, and they would hire kids from the neighborhood to come clean it up after games. And they would pay us like minimum wage. But, there was always this idea that if you wanted something, you were going to have to work for it. So there wasn't so much a sense of entitlement that someone was going to give me anything. And most of the journey from zero to us having this conversation has been about figuring out how to do something myself without necessarily going to anybody else to ask them. Not because of pride or anything like that, but a lot of times people have advice that is best suited for them. And it might not be best suited for me because it's when you're in a creative space, it's your voice that really is your moneymaker. Right. And if I'm asking another person for advice and that person does a completely different thing and they see the world and creatively see the world from a completely different perspective, they probably wouldn't be able to give me something that speaks to what I do best. So I think growing up in a city like Annapolis, that very humble city, touristy city, where people are mostly self-made, I think bodes well for coming into an environment where you're an entrepreneur. You sort of are, everybody here, the people who we respect and the people that are coming up in the game, it's a self-made thing. You have to develop yourself.
Even growing up in the neighborhood that you grew up, you knew you always wanted to be a filmmaker?
No. Okay. I knew that teachers would tell me that I had a relationship with words. I was a good writer. As an only child, I spent a lot of time in movie theaters. And
what was the first movie you've seen that made an impact in your life?
I mean, my mother and my father used to take me to a lot of movies. And I remember early on, like as a kid, 4 or 5 years old, that type of thing, seeing like Planet of the Apes, the Disney movies.
Yeah.
I'm a child of 70s movies. So a lot of the movies that didn't have a lot of high tech, but really were thoughtful science fiction horror films, were sort of the types of films that I fed off of. I think it was not just necessarily one film or one thing, but it was an environment of, I didn't have like, we all carry like a computer in our pockets right now to entertain us, like constantly. When I was growing up, you had to seek out entertainment. You only had 3 channels, and so you were at the mercy of whatever was going to come on television as to that thing that I liked, horror films, late night, creature features, that type of thing.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, or you had to walk to the movie theater, or ride my bike to the movie theater to see a thing. There was some effort that was involved in it. So that relationship with wanting to see something and having to do something to go and make it happen, I think played a role. And, now when I get an idea and I'll ask myself, is this a TV show? Is this a movie? Is this a comic book? What is it? And then I'll take the steps to try to make that thing. Or a podcast. What is it? What do I have to do to get from 0 to 1?
Now you go to Howard University. How did Howard shape you?
Howard was at the end of, because when I first went to colleges, it was to try to be an athlete, and I was horrible.
Basketball, football was your sport.
Both. And
Okay.
neither was my sport. I tried to do both. I wasn't very good at either one of them, but I tried. And
how far did you get?
Not far enough. Far enough that I knew I had to go do something else.
Right.
So Howard was more about, there were a lot of creative people, a lot of creative people of color, and this was during a period where the Spike Lee films, the Robert Townsend films, Daughters of the Dust, there was a lot of films that were coming out, Sankofa, just a lot of indie black film that felt like I might not be able to do Jaws or Star Wars or those things, but I know what this is over here.
Right.
And a lot of the people that I respected, Dr. Al Freeman, a lot of just really creative, talented folks seemed to come out of Howard. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And so I went to Howard and I started to study there. And
What was your major?
radio, TV, and film.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so I also, during that period of time, started working on movies in the Maryland, D.C. area that would come and do their glamour shots. Movies like Forrest Gump, Clear and Present Danger, Pelican Brief, True Lies, bunch of movies. And that the duality of going to school to learn a thing, but practically actually working on the thing, even as a production assistant, you're still in the mix of watching and being a part of and learning the psychology of how Hollywood works.
Now, you speak of Hollywood as a machine or mechanism. What would you say will be like a defining success in Hollywood for you? Or what was your first defined success?
Don't know if I've had it yet.
You're still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to survive
Right.
in the business with this amount of time and still being relatively relevant at this point in my career is something that I would define as success. But I think what keeps me going is the next thing. What's the next thing that's going to move the needle? What's the thing that's going to get me closer to being able to have an idea in my head and really being able to have a honest shot at getting it on a screen or a page or whatever.
How do you stay unjaded by the industry just from all the ups and downs and hurdles and obstacles?
I don't look for it to be an emotional release. I don't. It's,
Okay.
I see myself kind of like a construction worker with words. I don't see myself as, like I want to feel a particular way. Or
Right.
how my emotions moved. I mean, we're talking right now probably for the 20, 30 things that the industry has said yes to me to do, not the 10,000 things that they've said no. And so if you hear no as much and you have negative consequences from outcomes that you've started, you don't necessarily define yourself by either side. You just go into something, you hope for the best, you give it your best effort, and whatever the outcome is, I can't really determine. I can't determine even if it gets done and it gets made and it's in a theater or on a TV show,
Right.
whether or not people are going to like it.
Sure.
You don't know when you're making something what the outcome is going to be. So it's best the relationship is between me and the work. And that's the only thing that I can control. Everything else is up to fate.
Now, you go from Howard University to Hollywood. What brought you to LA?
Damon Wayans. I was working with Damon Wayans on a movie, Major Pain, and we hit it off. And he allowed me to work on a lot of his movies. And he was working on a movie, Bulletproof, with Adam Sandler. I'm actually in that movie for a scene. And, he told me that if I was to really take writing seriously and I wanted to be a part of it, I was commuting from Maryland to LA.
Oh, wow.
And I would get a job. I would get a call for a job and then drive to LA in 2.5 days.
Wow.
Really?
That was sort of the routine, like 7 or 8 times. Like I would
Really?
race to LA and live in my car.
Oh, you was trapper.
That was sort of the thing. And I came to LA right after Bulletproof and lived in my car for a while and figured it out.
That was amazing. That's amazing.
And you also worked on Blade.
That was my first job in LA. That was my first job as a production assistant on Blade.
All right.
Yeah.
We got to know at least one fun story about Blade.
that Blade experience.
That experience, that set, how was the environment like? Wesley Snipes in his prime.
It was cool watching Wesley train, warm up. Like Wesley really is a martial artist. And there would be a period where when he was getting ready to go into an action scene, you would see him and his team and the fighting team warm up. So you would see the Blade, him with the swords. You would see him do martial arts. You would see him in the costume, like in the costume of Blade.
Wow.
So you're sort of seeing Blade get ready to be Blade when he's going in to be Blade on camera.
Yeah.
And being able to see that was kind of cool. I don't think anybody knew the effect that the movie would have. A lot of people say that it's the beginning of the Marvel movement because it was the first superhero movie that sort of was taken seriously after you had, yes, Superman, the Donner movies were great, and some of the other movies, the Batman movies that came before, but I think the Marvel portion of it, you know, Blade was probably one of the first movies that had a real impact. So
my dad used to work at a naval base, and this is kind of how we got tapped into becoming a filmmaker and seeing movies at the big screen. So my dad used to work for the naval base, and every Friday he used to take us in movies because at the naval base, movies are free. And that's all we could afford. We couldn't even really afford like going to the movies and pay for a ticket. My dad was like, oh, let's go to the base. Let's go watch a movie. And we saw Demolition Man on the big screen. Like, oh, this is it. This is what we want to do. And just going into middle school, high school, me and my brother was always storytellers.
Yeah.
Like, what you guys do for summer? We told this elaborate story how we went to Paris and we caught this train and we was running and we was fighting our cousins for a book bag. And I'm like, that's the niche of it. Like, okay, we are storytellers because people are always gravitating and listen to us.
Right.
Even just when we just casually talking. And it was like, oh, we're actually crafting stories.
Right.
Now, going from Blade to your next project, how long did it take you from going from PA to writer?
I came to LA in 95. I had my first WGA writing gig around 2000. That was my wife and kids.
Okay.
And that was Damon Wayans too. I mean,
Damon Wayans is very pivotal in your story.
Damon didn't just give me opportunities with work. Damon really helped me with the philosophy of what Hollywood is and how it works and the psychology of it and how people perceive you and what you have to do in order to be able to get from step A to step B. So Damon was pivotal, not just in the opportunities he would give me, but the education as well.
Right.
Now, you're speaking about, like, I think Damon Wayans probably was your community, was your Rat Pack. Who else was probably in the running and gunning of Rodney Barnes? Did you have any other people that you
Other
workshop
filmmakers
ideas?
that you kind of like work with?
Because you see back in the day, they had like Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese.
I didn't have any of that. What I had was, I think the beautiful thing is a lot of people that I came up with, we all wanted to do something. And a good number of those folks that were production assistants or assistant directors or had a bunch of those jobs, entry-level jobs, eventually stuck with it and became what they wanted to become. And that was sort of it. It's like I never had the idealistic Coppola, this whole Zoetrope.
Right.
George Lucas was friends with Spielberg. I never had any of that. What I have had is I've been in situations where, for instance, I was Michael Clark Duncan stand-in on the movie The Green Mile.
Yeah.
And because I was long story, I was a big fan of Stephen King and wanted to meet him. And that felt like it was a path to meeting him. And got the opportunity to work with Frank Darabont and some really great actors. And a lot of times when you're able to see the best of what a system can be and the best of what film and creativity can be, it influences you. Because I've had both experiences. I've had like the way not to do it, and I've seen the way to do it. And you can sort of make a correlation in your head as to where you fit on that spectrum as to how you want to go ahead and do it.
Right.
And so I would say it's more of, I haven't had a whole lot of people put their arm around me and say, I want to be your mentor. But I have had a lot of people influence me, take an interest in me, and encourage me along the way to say that you have something and you should stick with this and point me in a direction or do a thing. But at the end of the day, I've always had to walk in that direction. I've always had to do something. But having the education was invaluable.
Now, where did your love from comic books come from? Because you're also a prolific comic book writer as well.
Yeah, when I was a kid, my mother she was a school teacher for 45 years, and she would do her lesson plans. This is before computers, of course. She would go do them at the public library. And there used to be, she would sit me in a section, I would go with her. She would sit me in a section where they would have all the kids' books, Cat in the Hat, Curious George, that kind of stuff. But under those books was a box of comic books, and I knew where they were. And I would just sit there for hours and look at them. And I think it was something about the way comic book graphic storytelling worked and the nature of superheroes and that thing. And they were simple enough at that time that I could grasp, even though I couldn't read well. You're talking about somebody who's 3, 4, 5 years old. But I understood it in a way. And as I got older, comic books sort of evolved from the 10, 12, 20, 25 cent books, disposable entertainment,
Right.
to sophisticated sort of literature. You had guys like Alan Moore and Frank Miller and a lot of other great writers and creators who just made books, The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen and all of this stuff that was way more layered than the stuff that I entered into when I was a kid. So as comic books evolved, I sort of evolved, and it was a reason to stick with it. I have a lot of friends who would read comic books like me, but it was just entertainment. They read it and toss it to the side. I read it and held on to it. And so it's still with me to this day.
Do you think?
What are some of the defining elements from TV writing and comic book writing, and just screenwriting in general in comic book writing?
I always looked at comic books. The key to a degree of success, I think, in working as a working writer is discipline. And that means practice. It's like a musician in a way. And all of my musician friends, they're always practicing. 100%. Just like artists. Jason Sean Alexander, who illustrates Philadelphia, every morning he'll get up and he works his sketchbook, as he's having breakfast or lunch or whatever. And so for me, writing comic books, I can write a book in a day or two. It's different if I'm writing a pilot or if I'm writing a feature. That may take a few weeks or a week, whereas I can still get that idea, that exercise of writing something out that connects. Because I see it all as story. I don't really see comic books, TV shows, movies as really that different. It's all storytelling.
Yeah.
And you need to practice it in order to get better.
Now, with all these new tools such as AI, ChatGPT, Bard, you don't use any of that. Have you tried to play with, since you do write the scripts in itself, now you can illustrate your ideas?
No.
You haven't tried Midjourney, Dolly?
No.
Really?
I don't even know what those things are.
Really?
I don't even know what those
I wish we could show you.
Show you. This is
one day.
Okay, one day.
now. I think right now, we're on the cusp of
The tech revolution.
the tech revolution, where tech is becoming the new frontier of storytelling.
And I always like to explain it like this. When you walk into a grocery store, you see the cashiers and automated cash machine. Now we're seeing technologies coming into the Hollywood entertainment system, where if we don't integrate technology into our Hollywood, we might get left out and left behind.
Now, would you entertain those particular type of modalities to your storytelling?
I'm not against them, and I'm sure that what you say is true, that at some point I'm probably going to be working next to a script that was generated by AI or something somewhere down the road. I think there's always going to be, from what I understand and the little bit about it that I know, it can regurgitate and generate things based upon the information that it's given.
Right.
Correct.
So if I begin to rely on that as a methodology, I feel like I get lazy
100%.
Yes.
because I need to still mine those places within me that I've yet to mine in regards to what it is that I do.
Right.
So, I'm if the reality comes, and I'm sure you're right.
Yes.
There was a time when someone would call you and they had to do it at your house, and it was a landline. You had to pick it up. It had a cord on it. Then there was a cordless version. Then there was a version that you stick in your pocket. And then there was one with apps and, can take pictures. And so, yes, the evolution of technology is always something that you have to be aware of. That said, I think that me as a creative, finding a way to integrate it into the next step, whether I'm doing a podcast, whether I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, beyond the foundational thing to do. The foundational thing that I do is I write stories.
Right.
And everything else is secondary to that, whether I'm producing a story, whether I'm acting, whether I'm performing a podcast with my voice, or whatever it is that I'm doing. That's secondary. So I don't think I have gotten to a place yet where I've mastered what it is that I do. To the point where I can rely on another thing to come in and assist me with that thing.
So you can have the distinguish from voice to technology.
Yeah, I think that I will be forced in some way, there'll be somebody you guys' age that they will stick next to me and say, "This is what we're going to do," and I will nod because I have a mortgage and I have
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think the strength of whatever it is that I do and what has served me from zero to now is that I continuously evolve as a writer.
Now with ChatGPT, you can reimagine things. You reimagine James Bond Himeros.
Yes.
Walk us through that and the idea, the conception of that.
Dynamite Comics or Dynamite Studios, Nick Barucci emailed me and said, would you be interested in taking a crack at James Bond and I think Army of Darkness? I got those two assignments at the same time.
Wow.
And fan of both. And typically, a lot of times when you're in the comic book space and you're a person of color, you get offered only
The black stuff.
Black stuff.
you want to do this black character, you want to do that black character. And more often than not, it's a street level character doing a street level thing, and you have to add in some aspect about how his race makes it difficult for him to fight crime. There's some racial element. And the opportunity to, I'm nothing against those stories. I dig those stories, but sometimes there is a sameness to those stories.
100%.
And unless you can find a new way to talk about something that is hundreds of years old, you feel like you're not really being challenged. And so with James Bond, it was like, okay, how can I take, there have been thousands of not just the movies, but there have been comic books and paperback novels, James Bond. And so what can I do that's different? And I felt like an adult version of James Bond dealing with sex trafficking. And because sex trafficking is such a global crime.
Yes.
And James Bond is seen as being a global
Figure.
that why not try to integrate him into something that could touch not only America and not only Britain. And, that was sort of the task. And so that became the subject matter. It just became finding an emotional story that could move James beyond the mission, move him emotionally, and get him engaged in the story in a specific way.
Who's your favorite James Bond? Sean Connery?
Aaron.
No,
Aaron.
I actually like Roger Moore. That was the guy who was James Bond the majority of time when I was a kid. I really, really, really respect Sean Connery because I felt like Goldfinger and some of those early ones were
or the
really
Chris
special.
Bronson era.
Yeah, not as much, but only because I just don't have an opportunity to watch a lot of them right now. But yeah, I'd say probably Roger Moore.
If you could reimagine, sorry, one second. If you could reimagine any horror story, well, actually, let's do Stephen King. I know you're huge fans of Stephen King.
Sir.
If you could reimagine one Stephen King novel, which one would it be?
It's tough to say. I mean, I like them the way they are because I remember as a kid, they used to have these paperback spinners in bookstores. There was this thing called bookstores that you would walk into one time. They had nothing but books in there.
Crazy.
We got Amazon.
Now you go to Amazon,
Amazon
push
now.
a button.
Yeah.
But they used to have these paperback books on a spinner rack. And I remember seeing this book, Carrie, and I believe it was Stephen King's first novel. And I remember picking it up as a kid and I had to reach up. And as you see, I'm really tall. So obviously,
it was easy for you.
I reached up and I saw all of these reviews about how good it was and I had to have it. So I read it. I think it was like $2 or whatever. And I remember falling in love with the way that he told the story and the way that he was able to take the horror elements, but make it human and make it almost like a person that I knew. And all of his books that I have loved, and most of them I love and or like, there was a tone that was under it that I always tried to strike. And I always felt like my culture, African-American culture, most of our books that were horror-centric always focused on race, the fact that we were black, and the fact that we had endured slavery and that. Something about that. It wasn't so much the people, unless it was Octavia Butler or Tananarive or somebody who was black that was writing the story. Usually it was the idea of blackness, not necessarily the culture of being black. And I wanted to be a part of storytelling that felt like I was talking about culture. And I think culture being the thing that how people do things, that we don't all approach life in the same way. We approach it based upon our experiences and how we grew up, the communities that we grew up, whether we grew up in the city or the country, or whether we had money or we didn't have money. I wanted to approach horror from a perspective of an African American perspective that felt authentic from my vantage point.
Now, going from that, if you had to reimagine James Bond, who's your top billing cast? Your top five billing cast.
That's tough to say because
Idris Elba?
no, mostly because I know there's a lot of that now.
Yeah,
You know, the classic character and make Batman black, and make Superman
I know,
black.
everybody
I
got
hate
black.
that.
All of
Honestly, I
those
really
other
hate
things. I know that happens a lot, but I would prefer, not that I have anything against, and Idris Elba was the gunslinger in a movie where I think in the book the gunslinger was white.
that. Right.
I would prefer that you create a world for that character that's his, and whatever his background, that's specific to his background, you started from that point.
Started from scratch.
Yeah, you started from a place where his identity is connected to why and how he does what it is that he does. I'm not against it. It's not like, oh my God, it's a black Iron Man, I will not go see it. It's not like that. It's just more of, because, they can invent a way, whoever the creative team is, to do it in a way that still feels authentic there too. I'm just saying for me, I prefer to see a character have his own unique beginning, his origin, and go forth from there.
Oh, it's brilliant.
With so many successes under your belt, do you still find resistance going to the studio system, getting your stuff made?
Sure.
And why is that? Like,
Oftentimes, if I'm writing from a place of my culture and my thing, more often than not, I'm not talking to someone who identifies with my culture in the same way that I do. So if I'm pitching something that is very, very culturally specific to someone who does not know my culture the way that I do, they're not going to resonate. It's not going to resonate with them in the same way that it resonates with me. So I may sit here and think that this is the greatest idea ever.
right.
They're thinking that if I don't get it, how will millions of people get it as well? And they're using their opinion and through the prism of their perspective. They're looking at it from there. And executives, the people who greenlight, they're under the most pressure because they have to go to someone and say why something didn't work.
Right.
So if we spent $50 million or $100 million on this idea, I have to be able to I have to be accountable to someone
Right.
to say why I made that decision based upon what.
Right.
And so I think that oftentimes is why you see so many remakes, because there's already IP that people are familiar with. So if you're walking in the door and you're saying, I know what The Color Purple is, based upon the Spielberg movie, based upon the play, the Broadway play, it makes sense to do another Color Purple or whatever movie. I'm doing The Longest Yard right now. There have been 4 or 5 Longest Yard movies or some form of the Mean Machine or something. So, if you're coming from a business place and you're saying, if it's a remake, it has the built-in DNA of some level of name brand familiarity versus this thing that's absolutely new. And if it's absolutely new and it doesn't have Tom Cruise in it or Idris Elba or somebody who has name recognition, I'm just banking on the fact that it's a good story, and whatever new filmmaker is walking in the room, I believe in these people. That's a tougher sell.
Right. So how do you mold yourself with writing to pivot to
Do you pander to the studios? You knowing it's a place of business,
Right.
And so you say, okay, I'm only going to write 10 characters because I'm going to make it like a $5 million budget film.
So you restrict your creativity to actually get the sell?
No, that feels,
Commercial.
both pander and restrict. Sound
Real
Key words here.
Both of those.
We'll put those on his tagline.
Yeah, both of those words sound like somehow I'm being
Selling out.
not even selling out. That I'm somehow subverting what it is that I want to do to fit whatever it is I think somebody else wants.
Right.
If you do this long enough, I think you develop an ideology of what's plausible. If I walk into a studio and I'm about to pitch something to someone and I know that person or I have an idea of what that person responds to, I'm selling the version of that thing that I think not only responds to, because here's the thing, if I just do what you said, pander and restrict, when I'm sitting there, if they say yes, I have to walk away and have to make that thing. And if I don't believe in the thing, I only wanted to pitch and I wanted to check that comes with them saying yes, it probably is going to suck.
Yeah.
So that doesn't work because you still have to work from your heart. Or I have to work from my heart in order to be able to make something that I think somebody may want to sit down and spend their time in watching. So I look at it more so, I don't look at it as personal as pander and restrict. I look at it as saying, okay, I'm creating a product. And if I'm creating a product and the person that I'm talking to is trying to sell that product to the most people, how can I connect to the human connection? You know, whether you're white, black, whatever, sexual orientation, religion, whatever, you're still a human being at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if I can appeal to the idea of whatever the human construct within the story is, father, son, sister, brother, family, if I can appeal to that aspect of the story and not so much, this is black and you have to do it my black way, do this black thing, as I said, and I'm going to pander and restrict it and do this thing. You know, I think there are ways to become, and you see people do it. You see people 100%. Who have great track records with being able to go in and craft incredibly amazing television shows and movies based upon understanding what the business is. The business doesn't owe us anything.
Right.
The business is a business.
100%.
You say like business is business. Okay, so now with that understanding, you sitting down, you're at your laptop, you're about to write your script. Business is business. What are some keys that you know that I have to keep in there that you say, okay, I know I had to maybe have these elements in the script to make sure it's a sellable script? Or you just write?
So pretty much what is a sellable script in today's period?
I think a good script. I think, you know, Hollywood probably buys thousands of scripts a year. Now, whether or not that thing becomes a movie or a TV show, that's a completely different thing. I try to write the best script that I can write. I wish I was smart enough to be able to do that.
The
thing
formula. Give me the formula.
I have to do. There is no formula. The formula for me, and then somebody else may be sitting here and they have an incredible formula.
Right.
But for me, it's mostly how can I write something that's close to my heart, that I feel empathetically. I feel the key to good screenwriting is being able to connect with an audience in an authentic way. You know, if I'm writing Friday and I feel like it's an authentic experience of people growing up on that block and how they think and how they feel and how they walk through life, that's going to resonate with somebody.
Yeah.
If I'm writing about a family and I'm doing it in an authentic way and I feel like you know, if I'm a father, if I'm a brother, sister, whatever, that whatever I'm saying in my story resonates with those people who occupy those roles or know what those roles are. I try to come from a grounded place of authenticity. And if someone buys it, or I've written probably hundreds of scripts, there are a handful of them that I've been able to sell. So
that's devastating.
No, it's like it's
real
acceptance for me. That's what the business that I'm in.
Right.
And that's for virtually every screenwriter that I respect, from the top of them to, you know, those in the middle someplace. They haven't been able to make everything that they put their heart into.
Right.
What is one passion project that you haven't made that you would love to get made?
Doesn't exist. I mean, I think everything that I want to get made, I'm in some process of Philadelphia, my comic book.
Right.
I tried to sell it as a feature film. I got close. It didn't sell. I made it a comic book.
Right.
You know, so if there's a thing that I really believe in, and something I'm really emotionally connected, I'm going to figure out another avenue. You know, maybe it wasn't supposed to be a movie or a TV show. It was supposed to be a book, or it was supposed to be a comic book, or it was supposed to be part of a podcast. There's so many different ways to disseminate story to the masses today. That's the thing that I think the beauty of technology for me. It's not so much things that make things, it's things that to me to help distribute things. So if what we're doing right now, you know, being able to have a conversation that will hopefully get out to people. Before, you may not, maybe 20, 25 years ago, you didn't have the same way of being able to get it out there. I would have to talk to someone on television, or I would have to go, you know, into a radio studio and talk to whoever wanted to talk to me. But I think now, you know, if you just got that entrepreneurial spirit, you have a desire to do something, you can create a room and do a thing and take it upon yourself and not necessarily wait for anybody to give you the green light to do it.
Right.
And I think that's how I more or less process. It's not like there's this thing dying and burning within. I just say, okay, I care about it enough. I'm going to stick with it. I'm just going to find a way to make it come to life.
Would you say it's okay for someone to share their idea, even though it's a prized possession to them? Say putting on small formats like YouTube, social media, Instagram, TikTok.
If you're asking me whether it's best to keep it in their head or create it someplace, I'm always going to say create it someplace.
Do you feel like studios would come out and steal it? People are so afraid, like they might steal my idea. Oh my gosh, I can't share it.
I know that's a reality. I've never really had it be one that it's funny. Today I got a bunch of texts from people. They saw that Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler are making a vampire thing.
Yeah.
And I do Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And it's an option and whatever. Man, you better hurry up. You better do this thing today and whatever. And I wish those brothers the best of luck, because the thing is, how many Draculas have we had?
Right.
100%.
How many, a rising tide lifts all boats. If somebody
How many
does
zombie
something
movies
great,
you seen?
people are more open to listen to me talk about horror because Jordan Peele has been so successful. And I'm sure Black Panther being successful opened the door for a lot of filmmakers and studios, for a lot of studios to open their doors to filmmakers to hear ideas and projects they probably wouldn't have listened to because this thing made $1 billion.
Now, I think the idea of the past success of other films can open the door for your particular film. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yes.
Awesome. So what are some career milestones that have been most significant in your journey so far? Would you say the Charles Duncan, Rush Hour, Damon Wayans?
It's a good question, because I really don't think that way. I mean, I say it because not that I'm not appreciative or grateful for any single thing. You develop a mindset when you've been doing this long enough to the next thing. Like the show Winning Time that I just was writer producer on. Our show got canceled, and I'm already, it's built in. Okay, what's next?
Yeah,
what's next? And I don't. It's not a whole lot of sentiment connected to it, because you work in a business where at any moment something can be taken away from you. Right? Like there is no real security.
How do you get over that?
I don't get under it. It's like I don't get to a place where if you tell me, if on the other side of that door I walk into a room and on the other side is whatever it is that I need, I just have to make it through. But if I walk through that room, somebody's going to punch me in my face, guaranteed. I'm not going to get mad or surprised when somebody punches me in the face, because I know that's what it is. Hollywood is the kind of place where disappointment comes with it. And so if I personalize that disappointment and I make it like it's happening to me, oh my God, why are they treating me this way? I didn't do that when I worked at Walmart. I didn't do that when I worked at any of the other jobs.
So you always had
along
this
the way. It's like, there's disappointment. There's always disappointment when there's something that you put a lot of effort into and feeling and emotion into. You're in the feeling business. The thing that you make is the thing that's feeling. But nobody cares about that part.
Yeah.
They care about how can we take all of this creativity and love and passion that this person has put into this thing and make money off of it.
Right.
They don't see it the same way I see it. And I know they don't see it the same way. So to hope or believe or somehow attach myself that if you're a producer and I make something and you hired me and then I hand this thing to you, that you're going to care about it in the same way that I do, it's kind of naive. You are looking to make money off of the thing. You're looking for it to be successful. You may like it and you may like me. But at the end of the day, the reason that we have this relationship is we're looking for success. And people are only going to do the thing that they feel either is going to emotionally be successful or practically be successful. And I say emotionally because there are people who fall in love with projects and will push them through. And you see it in indie film a lot. Like somebody really believes in a story, the first black mailman, and we're going to tell that story, and we have to tell that story because it's really, really important story. There are people who will make those types of films. But the people who make the films that are looking to make $500 million or $1 billion, I don't think they look at it with the same level of emotion that you do for that smaller thing.
So balancing act, how do you balance your career and your personal life?
I haven't figured it out.
All of us can be work addicts. I mean, we always can like pursue this career and write and produce. And how do you try to manage it, I guess?
I've been told, I have a therapist, I've been told that balance, I've heard that a lot over the course of my life. I haven't been able to find balance because I think when you're in a business that's as competitive as this business is, and that is demanding, and as you get older, it doesn't get easier. My manager actually told me, I was having a really bad day one day, and he said that the problem with the position that you're in and people like you is that you think the longer you do it, it's going to get easier, because in most professions it does.
Yeah.
Mine actually gets harder. They just pay me more. And so you hope that the money mitigates the suffering somewhat, or the discomfort. I won't say suffering, discomfort that you have to go through, because it has an effect on your life. And you have to create an ecosystem, I think, for yourself of people who support you in a way that understand that you won't always be at all of the functions. You won't always be able to do Christmas like people do Christmas or Thanksgiving in a traditional sense. You have to somehow find peace with how you're going to manage being in a competitive space for the rest of your life, or until you decide to stop.
So how do you pivot out of that? How do you pivot into creating your own ecosystem, such as Tyler Perry or...
You find people. I mean, I think it's your team. You see, I remember reading one time, or maybe it was 60 Minutes, with Shonda Rhimes. I think she had some kids or something, and she created a daycare room next to her office. Or you find balance with whatever or whoever your significant other is. Somebody has to have the emotional bandwidth to deal with someone who goes through the moods and, whatever your writing schedule. Some people write midnight to 4 in the morning. Some people, obsess all the way through. Everybody has their own way to do it. Finding someone who complements your way of doing it.
You said something that was very it hit home for me, is like, the more success you got, the more, basically, the further you got into your career, the more money they gave you. And it kept you going as far as, like, you keep feeding the beast. And essentially.
And it didn't get easier.
And it didn't get easier.
Well, that's the key. It's not so much that, they kept giving me money and it fed me. It was more of, you get a job and you have more responsibility and there's more expectation. And with that comes pressure, and with that comes more stuff, and more stuff that is challenging. And as those challenges come, people pay you more for the position, but that doesn't mitigate the challenges. It's not like it gets easier and you can sort of push it off and give it to somebody else.
Now, how does that affect your family life?
I think at this point, everybody around me knows, when to engage, when not. And probably, I try my best. It probably has contributed to divorces, but it also has, because I love my children as much as I do, I have figured out a way to not make them responsible for the choice that I made to become a part of this thing. And I think they respect the fact that most of what I do with them as the foundation of the emotional purpose of wanting them to see that something like this is possible.
Do they feel proud for you to see you obtaining all the success?
I think I'm still dad.
Yeah.
So because I'm dad, and it's a personal relationship, so I don't think they look at it like folks from the outside may look at it. I think they look at it more as, I'm sure there's some pride somewhere along the way, but I think there's more of that I'm the same guy that they've known from birth to now.
Yeah. Now, have your dreams and goals evolved as you're now in 2024?
Big
And what
time.
does that evolution look like?
When I first walked into the business and I was a production assistant, I thought I knew, oh, this is what the business is. And then as I moved up and I became a writer, I was like, oh, okay, this is what the business is. And I've come to find that I don't know what the business is. I know that every time I take a step, on the ladder of the business, I see something I didn't see before. There's another room, there's another door, there's another unknown that I still have to figure out and figure out how I'm going to deal with it. So I don't think I've gotten to a place where I know what this is. I know at the end of the day where my confidence lay is there's a script, there's an assignment in front of me. I have to figure out how to put my best effort into it. All the other stuff and the noise around me, whether or not an actor is happy or we don't get a location or studio doesn't like this, you have to change that. I can't control any of that stuff. I can only control how I react to it and how I react to the work that's in front of me. And sometimes when it feels overwhelming, figuring out ways to sort of mitigate that tension and anxiety.
I mean, in your previous, I would say, just bouts of Hollywood and also in your personal life with your relationships, what have you learned from either your marriages, dealing with your kids, and also dealing with Hollywood? Being in this industry is so demanding. What have you learned, and what kind of keys can you give us, someone young as myself, to say, hey, maybe I want a future in this, or maybe I should have run away? If it comes with,
I think the only thing that I've learned, or the most important thing that I've learned, is that it is necessary to have as much of a real life as this imaginary life. Because in the times in my life, 2012, I got really sick, I almost died. And the business wasn't there to save me.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really put enough focus on my personal life to be there in the way that I would hope, in an idealistic way, that people would come and to the rescue, so to speak. And I had to be honest with that. I hadn't really cultivated that. I had cultivated all the focus had been on the work, and not so much what happens when the work stops. And when life intervenes and says that the work must stop, what do you have to look forward to? And so I think now, as I get older and as I move into a different phase of the business, how can I create a life outside of it that is as satisfying and rewarding as the other thing creatively that I do?
Now, you're saying like you're putting boundaries in place, saying, okay, the work does stop here, or no boundaries.
No, I wish I could think as clearly as you do. It's not so much boundaries as much as it is making a focus, placing an emphasis on making sure that there are meaningful aspects to my life that have nothing to do with the creative process in Hollywood. However that manifests itself.
My brother wanted to play a game.
Hold on, I'm going to get to the game. Yeah, I got a couple more questions to ask.
I got a couple more questions
Okay,
too.
1 second.
Halftime game, or we want to get close to the closing
Okay.
game?
Let's
do halftime game.
let's do one more question because I want to stay on
Let
this
me do
subject.
one more question too.
Okay, I want to stay on this subject. Now, you said something about like having experiences outside of the Hollywood system. What does that look like for you? Do you go on vacations? Do you take walks? Do you spend time with your kids? Do you go and lock yourself in a room?
I mean, what I try to do, I used to do a thing a few years ago where I would take 2 trips a year with my kids. And I've gone to Africa and the Maldives and Europe and all of that's cool. But what I try to do, the problem with that was that would become there was so much distance between the things that by the time I got there, my head was still in whatever it was.
Right.
So being able to integrate some aspect of a lifestyle that gives me moments of relief and reality. Some people meditate.
Yeah.
Some people do whatever it is that they do. Even therapy is an aspect of it, of just reminding myself that this isn't, every year people die. People
Yeah.
die in
Yeah.
the business. Legends,
Yeah.
come and go. And, at their funeral, you honor them and you say, appreciate, man, I love that show. I love that book. I love that thing that they did. And it's on to the next thing and the next person and the next reality. So you have to put into perspective the nature of the importance of what it is that we're doing. It's important, but it's not the most important thing, because the thing that lives on is the life, how you made people feel, the children you created, or if you've created children, how they see you, how they feel about you, what the nature of that relationship has been, and your relationship with yourself and life. So, because while I'm sitting there in a dark room, writing a script and doing a thing, life isn't stopping for me to write this story and to do this thing. So just to continuously remind myself that life is happening and try to surround myself with people who support my best interests as much as me supporting theirs.
How do you find those people?
I think when you develop a sense of self-awareness of who you are, it's best to, you're better equipped when you encounter a person to attract that type of person, but also to know what person not to attract, because you understand yourself. And sometimes it's not about like not attract because this is a bad person.
Right.
But if you're the type of person, you really, really know yourself, and you know when you go through the worst parts of yourself, that could be problematic for another person. And it's not that they're bad, it's that the thing that I do requires the type of person that understands this type of mindset and this type of ecosystem that's around me. The more I understand it and the more I'm able to communicate it to another person, the better we can vet each other to be able to say, this is the best case scenario for us.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was great.
So I think that's more of, that's the closest thing to being able to create a healthy system. When I first walked into the business, my first job was in '89, I think. So I've been doing it since then. But my first writing job, like I said, it was around 99, 2000. I had no idea what I was walking into. I had no idea emotionally, psychologically, imposter syndrome, insecurity, all of those things that I had no idea. Like, why am I here? I've never made this kind of money before. I've never done this before. I've never done that before. And it was so radically different than what I had been raised in, the world that I came from, the pace of it. Working with incredibly talented people whose minds are constantly got experience in doing this. And I'm new and I'm raw and I don't know what I'm doing. Evolving, continuously evolving. And that has a tendency to you, if you don't beat yourself up too bad, you can become a better person through the journey, because that whole thing of dealing with stress and being able to manage it in a healthy way psychologically, I think forces you to continuously demand the best of yourself, can make you a better person.
And how do you get out of those stage of crisis when you find yourself at rock bottom and you find yourself in the moment of like, this ain't what I thought it was?
I don't have those moments. I mean, I had those moments. If there were periods of time when I wasn't, between 95 and 2000, when I didn't know whether or not this would ever happen. And I wanted to go back to Maryland, and I wanted to, just pack up and go home because I didn't see a way. And I had friends who would say, stick in there, hang in there. I've had enough good things happen to balance out the things that were problematic, because to give me enough faith, figure out a way to get from A to B regardless of what the circumstances are. And I've had a lot of trials and tribulations. And again, I have great children, and I have good friends, and I have people who care about me, and I have dreams, and I have goals, and I have things that I want to do, and there's a reason to be here. Once you sort of have that as your reset, there's not a whole lot that can be presented to you that's going to stop you or put you in a state of crisis. It's like, because those are the things that you're sort of, those are the resets. If you come at me and you say, you can't write and you can't do this and you can't do that, I'll hear it. I might not like hearing it, but when I go through the resume of good things that have happened,
right,
and I balance it against this opinion in front of me. I have this social media thing now where, because I have a podcast and I have a couple of things, and it forces you to be a lot more visual than I typically would prefer to be.
Yeah.
And you might have 100 comments. You have that one comment with that person that wants to say something or troll you in a particular way. I don't ignore those 99 positive comments because of that one person. I hear that person. That person is slightly louder than the other ones, but there's enough beauty in the world and enough beauty in the people who have supported me that I don't always give sway or way to the ugliness that comes as well.
Now, you were talking about motivation. How do you stay motivated, and what are some of your creative processes?
I don't. I'm a professional. It's not a thing of where if I need motivation, I probably need a new occupation. If I'm not intrinsically motivated to get up every day and do the thing that I've been fortunately placed to do.
Right.
You know, it's like I hear that sometimes. I hear that from people, what do you do when you don't have inspiration? What do you do when you don't feel like? What I hear all the time is, okay, you're probably not a writer. Because when writing chose me, I didn't choose it. There's a way I look at the world. There's a way I look at information that comes to me in the form of story. And if I wasn't getting paid for it, I'd still do it. I did it before I was getting paid for it. And didn't do it well, but I did it. And I did it enough that by the time I got an opportunity, I was ready for the stage of opportunity I was given. So motivation is, I'm in this position. I've worked to get into this position. I want other things, better things. If I don't do, I'm not going to get.
Right.
It goes back to shoveling snow and cutting grass. I'm not going to get the $10 the lady was going to pay me so I can go to the movies. I want to go to the movies. I got to cut the grass. It's not motivation as much as it is just the
Necessity,
reality that if I don't do this, I'm not going to get that. I'm not going to be able to support my kids. I'm not going to be able to see stories become things. I don't need to, go to the beach and look at the ocean in order to write a script. I can do it in a dark room. I can do it.
Speaking of doing it in a dark room, what are some of your creative processes? Like,
I get up, I sit in the
sitting
chair.
just right.
Yeah.
You don't do like the little cue card things and lay them out.
I've heard people do that, and I've been on shows where people do that. I think oftentimes it feels like double work. I do an abbreviated. I do abbreviated sort of headlines of what I want scenes to be and how I want them to feel, and I do them in a progressive order. The same purpose as the cards. I just do it in a way that is probably less involved. And then I do it on the page. It's like I do it in the scene. So yes and no. I don't, feeling like not necessarily the double work because it's double work, but it feels so, I like the idea of going into a scene and knowing what the purpose is, but allowing the scene to define what it wants its purpose to be. Ooh. So a lot of times characters will tell me, I don't want this to be that story. I want it to be this story. And I will see points in a story where this idea is stronger than the idea that I intended. Like I had it there as a placeholder, but really that's the thing. And being able to sort of see that and not allow my ego to get in the way and with my original objective is sort of the difference in having done this for a little while.
So most of your stories are character-driven instead of plot-driven.
I prefer character-driven stories over plot-driven stories. I enjoy plot-driven stories if they're told in a specific way. Like there's some creatives that are really, really talented in their ability to, one of you had mentioned anime, and I'm a big fan of, there was an era of martial arts movies like Hero or Crouching Tiger and all of those. And they have a way of telling story through movement.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily plot, but there's a way of telling story as you're doing a thing. I'm not that good. I prefer the character-driven stuff because I understand it, and allowing the character stuff to sort of inform the movement of the story, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. So I guess we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We're going to come back with a fun game. All right, we're back, and we're back with Rodney Barnes, and we're going to play a game. Rodney, this game is called Who Line Is It, and Where Is It From?
All right.
We're going to play a clip from some of your iconic library.
Okay.
Here we go. First clip.
Will you shut the fuck up? All of you! Nobody fucking listen. Sit down. Now you're gonna listen.
Adrian Brody and
You know what
Ring
you're
Time.
doing?
Sounds like
That was 10 seconds. You got it in 10 seconds. That's correct. That is correct.
Winning time.
Winning time. Adrian Brody. I'm going to connect to my roadcaster once I get it. Okay, so the audience can hear. All right, next clip. Let's see how many seconds can you get this one right.
Get out of the car. Get out of the car now.
Russia.
Didn't I tell
One
you to stay over there
second.
by the Duke?
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
It's my own
Rush
business, don't
Hour,
understand
Chris
the car.
Tucker, Jackie
This is one of my
Chan.
brother's.
It's one of my favorite movies
He
of all
probably
time.
watched it a
Billion. I watch it every year.
It was the first time I left America when they took me to Hong Kong.
Wow.
It was the first time I had to get a passport and leave America.
Tell me one funny, iconic story from Rush Hour.
Which ones can I tell? I'm thinking of 4 or 5. I can't tell.
Hey, you can tell it on the
This
pod.
isn't
Come
so
on.
much. This isn't so much funny as much as it was how Hong Kong worked in that period of time. I guess it was 2003 or whenever it was. We were shooting on the streets of Hong Kong, and the triads, the gang, stopped us from shooting because we hadn't paid whatever tax to be on the street to shoot. And the police wouldn't help. And I remember we were shooting, there's a scene where they're up on the roof and Jackie jumps off and there's this bamboo that he's holding on to and it's breaking along the way. I think it's Rush Hour 2. And I worked on both Rush Hour 1 and 2. And it was a butcher shop and they would take the pigs, the hauled out pigs, like they would take the guts out and put them on the street like newspapers and stack them up in front of the butcher shop, and they would stay there all night. And somebody would come in the morning and just bring them in. And it looked like bodies, like in quick sight, just seeing it. It was more of just a cultural thing that I had never seen anything like that before. But that's what I remember about Hong Kong. That's what I remember about Hong Kong.
How was it working with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan?
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, Jackie, incredibly humble to this day. If I see Jackie, just always just a humble cat. And Chris, I saw not long ago at a NASCAR race in St. Louis. And we took a picture and I posted it. And Chris is just the energy, beautiful brother. And, you know, that was the beginning of my career. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything. And the fact that, you know, he would advocate for me to stay on the film. Because usually what happens is when you leave America, you go somebody else. They hire somebody else in the other place. So you have to pay for plane tickets and hotel. They paid for plane tickets, first class and hotel, and I'd never been treated like that before. I lived in my car. I didn't know anything. And I remember one story. I'll tell a quick story.
Yes.
So, one night we were hanging out. It was Chris's stand-in, myself and Chris, and we were in Vegas. And Chris was gambling, I think, at the Hard Rock with Mark Cuban. And they get tired of gambling, and Mark says, "You guys want to go to the All-Star game?" And the All-Star game was in D.C., and we were in Vegas. And we were like, yeah. So 15 minutes later, we're on a jet. I'd never been on a jet. And my broken up pickup truck, like you drive to the tarmac, and it had a broken seat, and I had a little garbage company, so it smelled like garbage. And I'm on this jet. I'm on this beautiful G5 or whatever the hell it was, and flying to D.C., and we had the top floor of the Ritz-Carlton, and we were in the suite with Michael Jordan, and it was like one of those fantasy moments of everything that you would want it to be. And then we had to come back. And I remember from the plane, I could see my broken down pickup truck, and they were about to land, and I had to get off this G5 and get back into that pickup truck. And it was that transition of reality. And I remember looking in the rearview mirror at that jet saying, I'll never have this ever again. I do remember that.
That's amazing. Did you ever have another moment like that?
No, any jet I've been on since then, it's been a good experience. I never had better cars.
Better cars now.
Yeah, better cars.
All right, next clip.
What the hell was that, you little freckle-faced cartoon?
Major Payne. Yeah.
5 seconds.
Yeah, Major
Did
Payne.
I give you permission to sneeze, Opie?
No, sir.
And you
Let the audience get a little bit of that.
big-eared turd, otherwise I'll kick your ass back to Mayberry. I see we have a sickly boy on our hands. Well, we're gonna have to boost your immune system, son. Drop down, give me 25 push-up now.
Major Payne. You have an iconic story there. You have to have an iconic story there, Major Payne.
Would they
pivotal.
even reimagine me?
Can you do that Major Payne today with all the drama that we're going through, with all the political hoops that we have jumped through?
Probably not. I mean, I look at, I'm a wrestling fan. I tried to wrestle at one time.
Oh, really?
One of the things, that's another hour. I got it.
We're WWF fans.
But yeah, I was down at WCW and I went to the
That tryout?
plant, and I tried out and they beat me unmercifully. I said, I can't do this. Just like basketball and football, I figured out this wasn't meant for me. My point with that story was guys like Ric Flair from that time who had the Ric Flair stick with all the girls and the this and the that. When he tries to be that guy now, you get canceled for being that guy.
Right.
And that was that guy in the 70s and the 80s. That's all he was.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a completely different time, to have a guy like Major Payne and children. Mm-hmm. I think if you made Major Payne like work at a rehab center with adults, or something where
That would be hilarious.
it was a different world. But I think that version of the story probably, I don't know if America will have a stomach.
So that's your next script.
No,
a lot on your plate
I think Damon's got plans for something. We went to dinner not long ago, and he might have some plans for something.
That'd be beautiful.
You never know.
Next script.
Hey, Tony, come watch Dad on TV.
I am. I just gotta
Everybody
go to
hates
the
Chris.
They say rappers know their lyrics. You know your scripts. I'll let the audience finish the watching this.
They didn't jump off a bridge.
Dad's on TV again? Yeah, before he taught that guy down, he had to climb up to the top of the bridge to do it. It was so cool.
No, that was not cool. It was crazy.
It was crazy cool.
We had an opportunity to work with Tashina Arnold on our last film.
first movie.
Our very first feature that we just produced, and it was a blast.
She's incredible. She's a legend. She should get a star on the Walk of Fame. Like she is, and a great person. I mean,
Yes.
I think I've worked with Tashina outside and other things too, but Tashina's one of those people that doesn't get their due, who is consistently good at everything.
Yes.
100%.
And her sister too. They're
Yes.
all great people.
Beautiful soul.
Danae,
We love
they're
her.
great people.
Love you, Zane. Love you, Tashina.
Yeah.
Now, your journey on Everybody Hates Chris, you was there from the inception for a long time. Tell us, how did it make you, or did you make it?
The beauty of Everybody Hates Chris for me is because I just finished My Wife and Kids, and when I was doing My Wife and Kids and Everybody Hates Chris, I was doing the Boondocks at night. So it was like I had a day job and I had a night job. And Everybody Hates Chris gave me the opportunity to actually produce. Because when you're a writer, it's sort of like a government job where you have a G4, G5, or whatever they call it. And here you have staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-executive, et cetera, et cetera. And here, I actually had to do something. I wrote and produced that voiceover with Chris Rock.
Wow.
So those things you said, had to go do whatever, that I wrote a lot of those and would go to editing and place that into the show.
Wow.
I'd never done that before. I'd never worked that intimately, with Chris. He's in the booth and he's thinking, I know what I'm doing. I'm acting like I know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I just wrote this joke. I hope you like it. And over those 4 years, Chris and I became really good friends. And to this day, we just work together Monday. But I think very special relationship. I think the beauty of being able to have friends like him and Damon and different people is there's a perspective that they see the business from that I don't see it because I'm not at that place.
Yeah.
So when they give you words and wisdom and perspective, it can help arm you with what you need beyond your ability and your talent to be able to navigate the treacherous waters sometimes.
That's beautiful. You just answered my question. How was it working with Chris? But he just answered it. Next clip.
As a dog and not a rat.
Oh, ladies, a sweetheart, Mr. Kyle. Go on.
Wife and kids.
Give Mr. Kyle a kiss.
2 seconds. It's on this
I
magic.
have a rule. I don't kiss anything that uses its tongue as toilet paper.
Baby, dogs' mouths are cleaner than human mouths.
Yeah, let me lick my butt, then kiss you.
Now, my wife and kids is iconic. That journey, little brief story.
I think my first opportunity in the business was terrified every single day. As much as Damon was responsible for helping me through the journey, is another gentleman by the name of Don Rio, who is Damon's partner and created the show. He was the showrunner of My Wife and Kids, and he helped shape whatever raw ability that I have and perspective in actually becoming a professional. Because there's this period that you go through where you're trying to figure out what it is. Like, what is this job? What is working with a group of people who are really funny? What's my place in it? And sometimes getting the noise out of your head of the anxiety and the imposter syndrome and all of the other stuff. How do you get that out of your head to really give your best effort every day? And Don was very, very instrumental in helping me silence, or I won't say silence because it's still there, but quiet those voices to a place where whatever it is that I have that's positive to contribute to the process, I can hear it and I can offer it a little better.
Did you guys have a writer's room? Or
Yeah, we had a writer's room.
And how did that writer's room look like during that time? Was it all white people or is it all mixed?
There was a bunch of Wayanses, a lot of Wayanses. Damien and Craig, his nephews, his sons, Michael and Damon Jr., some legends, Jimmy Vallerly, J.J. Walsh, Kevin Rooney, Allison Faust, one of my best friends in the world. Bunch of just really great talented.
How do you, as an EP, how do you go and pick your writers or people that you work with?
You try to find people who have voices that can contribute to the thing that you're putting together. If I see a show or I create a show or I'm trying to create a show, I know the part I know. I don't know the part that I don't know. So you try to find people who, if it's a family show, I know what it means to be a father and I know what it means to be a son, but I don't know what it means to be a mother. I've had a mother, but I don't know what it feels intrinsically to be a matriarch of a family. So you find somebody who's got that voice. You find someone who has all of the other voices that you need, and you hope that you can populate a room enough to find voices that have some chemistry and synergy. Because, just because you find the right people, it's like a basketball team. If you find a group of people that can't work together, even if they're incredible, doesn't mean they're not talented. It just means personality-wise.
Yeah.
And then you have to know your personality and whether or not you will be able to effectively work with someone who is, for the most part, a stranger. And all of us, well, many of us, some people are more grounded than others, we come with our own neurotic way and sensibilities. Like we all sort of, writing is a singular process. It starts as a singular process, and you're saying take that singular process and connect it to a group of people. That doesn't always flow, but oftentimes the showrunner or executive producer, whoever is at the head of the table or the heads of the table, they manage that. That's part of the process of managing a group of people, is being able to say, you're best suited for this, you're best suited for that. You're going to play point, you're going to play power forward, you're going to be a center, and we're going to try our best to make something.
Last clip. Let's see. This is a tough one, real tough. Let's see if you get it.
Well, I'm black now.
Food ducks.
The first thing I did was quit all my jobs. I don't know how I'm supposed to pay the bills. Probably have to start selling crack or rapping about selling crack. I might not even have revitiligo.
So iconic. Uncle Ruckus.
Yeah.
How did your inception, what are your creative process when you go into a show like this? What is your thought process? How do you guys attack a show like this? Do you want to push the envelope, or do you say, hey, let's try to play in between these boundaries?
I mean, I think one, shout out to Gary Anthony Williams. We go on the road sometimes and talk about the show when we go to conventions, comic book conventions and things. I mean, I think the math of the Boondocks was already laid down by its creator, and the comic strip. That there was already a math of Granddad Huey and Riley to begin with. Uncle Ruckus was kind of an outlier that came in for the TV show, but fit really, really well. And I don't think it's a thing of purposely. I can only talk about my part of it. I don't think that there's a thing of purposely trying to be over the top. I think it's more of trying to speak to the beauty of the Boondocks and the satire of the Boondocks was about trying to be honest in a world that isn't always honest. And for me, the stories that I would pitch and the stuff that I would contribute often had to do with the dividing line of what the world is. For instance, you would have R. Kelly, and some people say, I love R. Kelly's music. I'm not even going to look at that stuff over here on the other side. And some people say, how can you listen to that music? All there is he did these things. And to me, that made a perfect episode because you already had conflict naturally built into the DNA of what an episode would be. And across the board, I think the Boondocks' ability before social media, because we were right before social media and people being able to express their discomfort en masse. We virtually, in the first couple of seasons, said everything. And it was kind of fun. It was kind of cool because I was working network TV by day. And in network TV, you have to be creative about how you say things. Boondocks, we just said whatever. It wasn't a thing of, maybe even sometimes maybe some things should have been cut out. But you take the good with the bad, and I think when I see reels of things that still have some type of social relevance and how people, wherever I go, at some point somebody's going to ask me a question about the Boondocks. So
it's such an impactful show. We don't want to keep you here all day.
Yeah. Last question. You had an ocean of work and history, and our always last question is: have you found what you're looking for?
I mean, it's a multifaceted question. I mean, I found what I think I was put on earth to do. I think I'm a writer. I think I'm supposed to express ideas and story in a way that I do. And it's fortunate that I grew up in a time that there was such a thing called TV and movies, and that I found my way from the East Coast all the way here. And I found a lot of supportive people who helped me get in a position to be able to do that thing. So I found that. As far as have I found the thing that I think ultimately I was meant to do, I think I'm still looking for that.
Beautiful.
So,
Rodney Barnes,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.